Welcome to this week's BitShares Dev Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all BitShares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our Hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the BitShares ecosystem and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Welcome to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today is Friday, March 27th, 2015. We begin today's hangout with Bytemaster, the engineer who designed delegated proof of stake, DPoS, and the BitShares flagship decentralized exchange. As always, we will start with a project update, and then we will move on to the community's questions. We have chosen the town hall style format for a very specific reason. BitShares gives each shareholder power over the evolution of the ecosystem, based on the amount of shares he or she has invested. Bytemaster is only the creator and lead developer of the BitShares chain. He may be a walking, talking expert with respect to the inner workings of the BitShares blockchain, but he is not its king. His opinions are precisely that and should not be considered as the official stance of the entire BitShares community. That is why you are either in attendance today or listening. The BitShares DAC is intended to develop in accordance with the consensus of the community, so never be afraid to stand up and play a role. Indeed, our very success depends on it. And with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and open it up for any updates that you'd like to give us, Bytemaster, and then we can move on.
The primary update is that updates are now going to flow from, we have a regular Monday morning meeting with the entire team. Stan will be taking notes during that meeting and publishing regular updates on the forum that normally I'd cover at the first part of this session. The goal of this session is to focus on answering specific questions from the community rather than recapping the regular updates. If you would like to, you can review some of those updates for the sake of your audience prior to me showing up or during the editing process. I'm trying to streamline the number of meetings I have, so I'm not going over the same information multiple times per week.
So I guess with that, we could get started with the community's questions. Does anybody have any questions specifically here before I get into the questions that have been asked on the forum? First question from the forum. How can we create BitDogie, BitLTC, etc.? So a pegged asset with 4 or 3 characters costs 500 BTS each without this huge cost. So do we have a way to create them without a hard fork, or do we need to choose long words like Dogecoin, Litecoin, etc.? And he says here it doesn't seem like a good idea to do it that way. I think it would be a great move to get in contact with other crypto communities, especially after we want to be a decentralized exchange.
The reason for making things expensive was to prevent squatting on the highly valuable short symbols. I see no reason why you wouldn't just get the symbol Dogecoin or Litecoin rather than LTC or whatever the Doge symbol is. That would be the preferred method. If the delegates want to, they can fund the registration fee for the creation of one of these assets, because the registration fee in turn gets circulated back to the delegates. At least those with 100% pay would end up getting a large percentage of that fee back. But there would have to be a strong case for creating bit assets tied to these other coins. I think that it's really challenging because of the tribal nature of all the cryptocurrency projects. No one in Dogecoin is going to be terribly interested in supporting what they perceive as a competitor by working on our exchange. But long answer is if there's significant interest from their community, they will fund the purchase of the asset and make it happen. Long term, bid assets will be managed by users and not just delegates. So you can have a user-issued bid asset where they publish their own price feed. And that would be the ideal way to bootstrap new bid assets that can eventually be handed over to the delegates. That would be a longer-term vision.
Are you saying that would be through like a gateway of some sort?
I'm saying that imagine a user-issued asset where you only have to trust the issuer to publish a price feed. That would be the way to bootstrap new things in the future. But once again, that's just a concept that's been introduced by Theoretical, or also known as Ben. And that would be how we would do that in the future. In the meantime, under the current system, you have to first convince the delegates that it's worthwhile publishing feeds. And I don't think it's wise to publish feeds on assets that are not going to have a long-term life expectancy, because the process for winding down a bid asset and deciding when to stop publishing feeds is it's a little messy.
Is it a little messy, or is it just kind of not established yet?
It's not established yet.
Okay, so this is something that we're not quite sure yet how it's going to look in the future, and something that maybe we should keep in the back of our minds moving forward.
It comes down to the delegates stop publishing feeds, after which point no more margin calls and no more shorts will happen, and all parties have to settle voluntarily. That's how you would wind down one of these markets.
Related to that question, is it a matter, there's no overhead on the part of developers to support some new bid asset, is that correct? It's just a matter of feed publishing, which is more of a delegate responsibility, and maybe market maker bots, which is also a third party, not necessarily developers.
Correct. Developers are not needed to add new bid assets.
A question on a slightly different topic. The recent upgrade to fix some of the market issues, the 0.8 and 0.81, like it or not, seems to be having some forking issues. Like we're currently at 85%, and I've had a delegate that I've had to muck with to get back online. Can you give us an update or your thoughts on this issue, or is it just we're going to wait for it to resolve itself?
Yes, the DAC is now self-aware and is working on its own solution to this particular problem. That's the new feature in 8.1.
It's self-aware. Maybe.
Just kidding. Nathan and Vikram have been looking into the cause of the issues. It seems like Nathan was able to resolve all issues by re-downloading the blockchain from scratch. There seems to be some inconsistent state that crept in from the delegates that were slow to upgrade and didn't upgrade before the hard fork. We tried to make it easier on delegates by not forcing a re-index, but if you go too long, we only maintain an undo buffer, which is how far we can actually automatically switch back to the proper fork. We only did that for a short window. That's to basically minimize memory and maximize overall performance. If you go beyond that window down a fork, then you have to re-download the blockchain to get on the right fork. It is a high priority of the team to track down the exact cause of it. We have seen the mysterious behavior, and we're looking into it.
Are the chain servers that are available, there's not too many of them, but are the chain servers that have been published on the wiki, are they up to date so that if you follow those chain servers that you'll get back on the right fork?
If the chain servers are on the right fork, then I guess you can use that approach. But if all you do is re-index, you're going to re-index back onto the wrong fork. I'm working with them to have re-index stop at the last checkpoint and then download everything after the last checkpoint as the solution to simplify this process in the future.
I think that's a great solution. So you're sort of like saying, okay, we know 90% of the blockchain we have is valid. There's no point in re-downloading all of it. The other thing I noticed when I was fixing one of the delegates was block production flag was on, and it appeared to be on in the wallet and on the wallet get account, but I had to set it to true again, and then it instantly started producing blocks. So I don't know if it's related, if that was an isolated event, but for whatever reason, the blockchain is not aware, solve or otherwise, that the flag was indeed set to true.
I saw your comment about that in either Skype or the forum. And did you file a bug report? That's what I'd recommend on that, because Vikram is systematically using the issue tracking on GitHub to track down issues like that.
I did mention it to him, and he did request a bug report, and I'll do that. I just, I don't want to spam you guys with something that may have just been like a one-off weird thing. I'll log it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I had a question about feeds and their overall quality. How do you feel about the current feed quality? The sources that we're getting our feeds from, how often they're being published. What's your take on where we are with the feeds right now?
In my opinion, the feed quality should not matter as long as it's within the ballpark of the right price. It's there to prevent manipulation to unreasonable prices. Ideally, anyone who's placing a short order should put a limit that limits the lowest price at which they're willing to sell. And if they do that, then it doesn't matter what the feed is, they will not sell at an unreasonable price. On the other side of the equation, as long as their feed's somewhat accurate, you're not going to get an unreasonable margin call. I think as long as the feeds are accurate within 5 to 10%, that we have a viable system, assuming shorts are using limits when they put their when they place their order. The feed should be viewed only as a safety net and not as the absolute guarantee. That said, the feed is the price at which a wall forms, where everyone below the feed is at that wall. But if you view the market in absence of the feed and it was just a free-flowing market, then the system also still works. All you're doing is you're just squishing all the orders on one side of the feed. You're pushing them up to the feed price. So I really think that we should not emphasize accuracy of the feed as long as it's within the ballpark and is highly correlated.
Now, as a merchant that's going to be accepting bit assets, I find that statement slightly troubling, simply because accepting bit silver and bit gold, we look towards the internal system to get a feed for what the current value of silver and gold is worth. We ran into an issue during development where a large portion of the users use a specific tool set, and where it grabs its price from, I think it was Yahoo Finance, decided was down for a little while, and that the market's still trading, and my business is precious metals. The market's still moving and the system's down. Now our site doesn't know where to price things at, because it doesn't know the current value of bit silver, bit gold, things like that. So as we move into merchant adoption, do you think that maybe we're going to be presented with some problems if we don't keep up with these accurate feeds and reliable feeds?
All right, so there's two things going on here. One is the viability of the peg, and the other is the usefulness of the median price feed for something other than keeping the peg. In your particular case, you need a price feed for your business, and you probably don't want to use the median feed because it's going to be a lagging indicator anyway. Even if the delegate's published every hour, you probably need something that's up to the minute accurate. So I would highly recommend that services like yours get a real-time source of information. The delegate feeds can be one source, but if you see a big discrepancy between your real-time source and the feed price, that's something the merchants need to take personal responsibility for double checking. That said, I do think it would be a useful service for the delegates to aggregate accurate feed prices from multiple sources, such that if you just need a price that is close to the moving average, you can look at the feed price in BitShares. So I would recommend that the delegates use scripts that pull prices from multiple sources and that they update it frequently.
One of the things that we had kicked around internally was essentially paying for a service that collected a medium price from multiple services, promised a certain reliability, and we were thinking of running a delegate and then using delegate funds to pay for the service, and then making this feed available to all the delegates. So then we know all the delegates have a reliable service, that they can pull from, instead of these, nonprofit sites where maybe it's not quite as accurate and they don't maintain, reliability. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a good idea for delegates.
The other question was completely off topic, but somebody else asked, how do you feel about the multi-level marketing?
This is an area that I have been going around. We've been discussing variations on this as part of our referral program that people have complained has never materialized. The reason it hasn't materialized is because there are lots of challenges with getting something like that right. I like the concept in general. I like anything that aligns incentives that encourage viral growth. So it's a PR issue as far as how many levels you want to have. I think one level is okay. Once you start getting like 2 or 3 levels deep in one of these schemes, it starts to look like a scam, and you get scam accusations. So we need to weigh the benefit of financial incentive against the accusation of scam to determine whether or not a pyramid-style marketing campaign makes sense. I do think a referral system is good, a good idea, goes one level deep. The challenge, of course, is preventing fraud and abuse, and doing so in a way that's maintainable. And the other challenge is raising the funds necessary to pay for the referral program. Because these things are future concepts, I can't go into exact detail until we've internally come to a consensus on what we think is the best approach. But I do believe that there is a lot of value in something like what Max presented.
That answer your question?
Yeah, I actually, I kind of stayed out of the whole thread, but I read it all. I'm really for it. I think it's a great idea, and it can be a very, very useful tool. I understand why people have a problem with the whole $20 essentially buy-in, but I also understand why it's necessary. Until we get some sort of identity verification system, in order to stop people from gaming the system, or at least minimize it, you have to put some kind of financial barrier in there. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next question that was asked in the thread then. Is DevShares still expected to be useful? This is David P. Brown asking. I wonder if it's something that is expected to be useful rather than something that is being useful. I don't mind, but if it's not worthwhile, that it would be useful to know for those who are running DevShares without any real income from a BTS delegate to compensate. Any thoughts on that?
DevShares is useful for when we are rolling out new features that are not time sensitive. I think we might have bypassed DevShares for the recent hard forks because of high priority bugs that needed to be addressed, that we could not merge directly from DevShares because DevShares contained some more experimental stuff that wasn't quite ready to go into a emergency hotfix. But I expect DevShares to continue to be useful going forward. If it ceases to be useful, then we will make an announcement about it.
And to the question that he's talking about, no real income for it, have you considered or really kind of thought about how it might be made a little bit more monetarily compensable for the people who are running those chains? I mean, the delegates on that chain?
I think running delegates and learning from it is something you do for your own testing, for your own infrastructure purposes, and not necessarily for the monetary reward. It's a good testing ground for people that want to play with becoming a delegate. I think that with the current low market cap, we need to be very conservative with how much we are paying for things like this. We all need to pull together and contribute to making this thing a success. And so we can't pay for everything. I think there's lots of people that are volunteering to run nodes. Anyone who wants to test the new features or integrate with the advanced user issued asset stuff prior to it being in BitShares has incentive to run these nodes.
Would the MLM be an example of something you might want to test out on the dev shares, or would that be something that wouldn't work because of the limited scope?
Would certainly be something that would go through dev shares. That's a significant change if we were to implement that at a protocol level.
What is being done to get new users on board? Is there anything that is going on behind the scenes that we might not already be aware of that is being considered, or anything that you've considered personally and might, like to talk about?
I can't talk about negotiations going on with business partners. It's just general policy. I can say that we have really positive developments with partnerships that could bring many new users to our system. But I can't talk about them, and I don't want to raise any expectations until a deal is sorted out. I think in general, we are making developers available to support third parties with integration if those third parties have the potential of bringing lots of users.
Well, in this, this kind of moves us back a little bit into the dev shares question. As far as your point earlier, you mentioned that you foresee in the future developers actually working for third-party firms who might be running their own delegate, right? So do you foresee maybe that a dev shares delegate would be able to utilize the skills that they've learned to kind of say, hey, here's my past history on the dev shares chain. You can see right now I've run this delegate for this long. I could run this delegate for your team.
Exactly. That's the purpose of dev shares, is to prove to yourself and to others that you have what it takes, as well as to experiment with new features and give the developers a chance to see what happens in the wild with some things that don't necessarily happen in the controlled conditions of internal tests.
Of course, I'm going to just stop for one moment and remind everybody, if you have a question or a comment about anything specifically that we're talking about and you haven't raised your voice, please feel free to state it in the message box or even speak up if you're so inclined, so we can make sure to give you a voice. That's kind of what this is all here for. So with that said, LuckyBit has 2 questions. What are your thoughts on the new SEC ruling, which legalizes equity crowdfunding? And this was something that, for those who haven't been on the forums for a little bit, I believe Max Wright actually, from the BitShares 101 book and BitShares TV, posted to the forums. Do you have any comments on that?
I think it's a very positive development, and it will help the business case for BitShares going forward.
And for those who are kind of newbies to the ecosystem, would you be able to describe it in your own words, what your takeaway was from this?
I only spent about 30 minutes reading the overview and discussion of it, but my general takeaway is you still have to do a lot of due diligence in order to, not necessarily due diligence, but there's a lot of paperwork you still have to go through to use these crowdfunded stuff. It's just a slightly lower barrier to entry with a slightly easier approval process. It does not appear to be one of those things where you can just decide, hey, I'm going to go do this and go do something. So that said, anything that reduces regulation and makes it easier for companies to comply with regulation increases the opportunity in this space. So it's not quite the free-for-all that we would have hoped for, but it is a reduction in regulatory burden for getting something like that done.
Fair enough. And the second question from Lucky Bit is, are there any long-term plans for implementing proof of resource so that the market can be created around secure storage of data? We need some way to generate income through the DAC so that we can keep buying BTS, but also so we can have a decentralized storage for our own ecosystem.
I don't know about proof of anything. If you're talking about a service like MadeSafe, then I think there's lots of opportunities there, but I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
I've been reading around a little bit, and of course, anybody who, if I'm wrong here, please let me know, guys. It's kind of similar to MadeSafe, I guess, to a degree. It's proof of resource being that you have the hardware, that you have the hard drive storage space, and you kind of mine with your hard drive, as I've read it. And there was a new coin that came out that did it this way. It wasn't quite how MadeSafe did it, so I don't think that MadeSafe could be considered proof of resource in this regard. But if I'm wrong, of course, anybody can stand up and let me know.
Resource is a anti-Sybil attack approach. Anything that's proof of work, resource is just a kind of work. In most cases, proof of stake is also proof of resource. It's something valuable that you have to physically have that's a limited supply. So there's that. Last question, someone asked about the dev team's financial runway. That is something that we are watching very carefully, but I believe that the dev team is organizing itself to be sustainable it's obviously longer the higher the BTS price goes, but we've got opportunities and sources and business plans laid out to keep the dev team going, hopefully indefinitely. So we're watching things carefully, but I believe that we are going to be okay with the dev team.
Another unrelated question. Notes recently started trading on the BitShares exchange, internal exchange. Was there I guess there was discussion between the developers of BitShares and developers of how that's going to work, or is it just going to be a fungible asset between the two blockchains? If this is written up somewhere on the forum, I can go look it up, but I hadn't seen it.
You'd have to ask Toast what's going on with that. He's the one that's basically liaison between the two, and it's a very loose communication between the two projects. So we're not having lots of meetings. So I don't know too much. All I know is I got a bunch of notes showing up in my wallet a couple days ago, and they're going to be trading on the BitShares network while their system is under development. Toast says good things about the team that's building it and their plan. So if Toast is excited, I'm excited.
Yes, he's not one for false praise.
What's the odds we could get Toast to show up to one of these mumbles to kind of talk about these projects? I was caught a bit off guard when I had a bunch of notes in my wallet too.
I would have to ask Toast that. He's pretty heads down on the music stuff these days. So pester him on the forum, call him on Skype, get him in here. I'd love to hear what's going on too.
So there isn't. It was. I guess what my question was, and you've answered it, was this isn't part of a larger cross-chain scheme. It's more of something they're working out themselves.
Exactly.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
This is Kronos. Another question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a couple questions. I'm thinking about putting forward a delegate, and I'm just wondering if the wiki is up to date on setting up a VPS. And then secondly, I've read about delegates outsourcing the VPS maintenance. Is that common? Is that encouraged, discouraged? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, my delegate's been outsourced. And there's lots of developers that don't run their own delegates because it's just more efficient to divide the task. I highly recommend that all delegates that are not simply running a node outsource and allocate a percentage of their income to pay for the maintenance of the server and create a buddy system. And I've talked about that in the past. The buddy system is where the delegate that runs the node receives the money and pays the delegate that's doing work minus a small fee. That would be the preferred approach, because the person doesn't get paid, they're going to make noise. And if the person's not doing work, the person doing the paying is going to make noise. It keeps everyone accountable.
Kronos, the way this has typically worked out is it's actually become fairly standard, and at least for the people that I help out, is if you're doing other things with the funds and you don't have time to, typically a technical person will get the VPS, set everything up, get it going, and then you negotiate a percentage, usually between 5 and 10%. 5% seems to be kind of the norm, at least for me, and it's a script, and when the payments reach a threshold, or the value of the delegate reaches a threshold, it automatically sends payment to an account of your choosing, and so it's fairly hands off, and it seems to be working out quite well, pairing a technical person with a non-technical person, or a person who doesn't have the time to.
Does that satisfactorily answer your question, Kronos?
Yeah, it kind of comes as a surprise to me, because the purpose of delegates is to be decentralized, but it sounds like one technical person, in quotes there, could manage many nodes. So is there some unofficial policy about that?
Well, delegates are elected, and it's usually known. The delegates are known people. That's how they got in. And if there's an economy of scale at play, and Dan, correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but you have a fairly fixed cost of running a delegate. You have the VPS fees. You have the time invested in developing the scripts, and just the day-to-day running of a delegate. Usually not much, but when we're in heavy updates and forkings and that sort of thing, it can be time intensive. And so we have a market cap that maybe doesn't support 101 delegates all running independently on their own VPSs. And so it would be technically very difficult to say, okay, at this market cap, we only need 51 delegates instead of 101, or at another market cap, we need 201 delegates. So what you can do, or what's sort of naturally happening, is rather than trying to do forks and change the code, say, okay, now we only need 75 delegates, is we're starting to see some delegate clustering, where I think at most people, a technical person will run 2 or 3 delegates typically, so it sort of simulates reducing the centralization a bit for just out of economy. But as the market cap increases, it's going to make more sense to separate it out, because the incentives for people to attract IT talent to run the delegates increases. And so, like right now, one of the problems is we have with the market cap now, at 5% pay is barely enough to pay the VPS fee, and so the person running the delegates basically doing it on a volunteer basis in the hopes of future value kind of thing. So it is affecting decentralization a bit now, but I don't think it's to the point where it's a problem.
Right. Okay, that is helpful. If I were interested in setting up my own VPS and just handling that myself, what's the best place to go for information? And is there a specific person I should talk to for help on that?
I'm a good person, I guess. Also, you can hit me up on Skype or PM me in the forums, and you can also post in the forums. There are some wikis. My recommendation, first and foremost, is use a Linux. Yes, and use the same distribution and version of Linux that the developers are using. You can get it to work in other versions, but you're introducing headaches. So there's a few sort of best practices and tips and things we've learned along the way, that you can gain from. There's a delegate group on Skype where the delegates sort of swap questions and tips and a heads up if something's wrong with the network, that sort of thing. And that's a really valuable place to have some Q&A as well.
Okay, thank you. And with whom am I speaking? All I know is I'm talking to a voice right now.
I'm Riverhead, and
Okay.
You can find me on the forum as Riverhead.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Well, with that said, we have all of the written questions from the forums have been asked. We are sitting at approximately the 42-minute mark, and I know that Bytemaster is trying to cut this down a little bit so he can get back to work. Is there any final question or comment from the community or from Bytemaster that you'd like to cover?
I have one brief one related to the time split. It was proposed that maybe Stan do 30 minutes and Bytemaster do 30 minutes. Is that something that you guys are open to entertaining?
Yeah, I suppose Stan could do 30 minutes and I can do 30 minutes.
That would keep our Hangouts to the hour that we're used to in the past, and it would also give another perspective if Stan is up for that.
Well, and this would be, just to piggyback on you, Tom, Bytemaster, what are your thoughts on, now, of course, I understand you're not going to be able to speak for the entire dev team, but do you think that are there any other devs on the dev team that you feel might be interested in occasionally taking your place and kind of talking a little bit themselves? Because you oversee all this stuff and kind of a macro level to a large degree, and I'm sure you're digging into specifics, of course, in many places, but there are specific people working on specific areas, right? Are there any people who are working in these specific areas that might be interested in kind of getting on here and chatting with the community, or what are your thoughts?
My general thoughts are to free them from having to worry about this so they can be more productive. Types of meetings and high-level questions, I'm trying to encourage the developers to be more heads down on the code and less wasting time on the forum. Not that it's really wasting time, but it's a lot of information to be involved here and there. So my preferred method is to have, I meet with the developers and everyone gives their status update on Mondays. And Stan's going to be taking notes from those meetings and relaying that to the forum and to the session. So that's my preferred mechanism of doing that. Otherwise, the developers have to adjust their schedule to accommodate these type of meetings. There's just a lot of extra overhead. So that's my preferred approach, at least for the developers that are here. Any developer who is, I guess, not the innermost core, but surrounding core, I think should come in here because they have information that I don't necessarily have because I don't talk to them as often.
So largely you're just saying, hey guys, keep on trucking and let's get this 1.0 version where it needs to be and let's get the 1.0 version out.
Correct. I think that's going to be it for me today. It's 11 o'clock. I appreciate everyone who came out. This is a tough time emotionally for anyone who looks at the share price. I want to remind everyone that this is about a longer-term vision of decentralization and independence, financial freedom, that the vision is more important than short-term profits, and that I appreciate each and every one of you who is invested in the success of BitShares and is contributing and showing up to Mumble sessions. It is you guys who make this project a success, and I appreciate each and every one of you.
Yeah, and I'll second that. It's very interesting to see, one of the things that is very interesting to me is you have all these different, what we call coins in cryptocurrency generally. We've kind of turned that on its head a little bit, but they go out and they pump up these coins and they grab a community for a short period of time. These people will go out and buy the coins up and it'll pump up the value of them on an exchange somewhere, and then the development kind of just goes away and they don't interact with the community. The community just kind of fizzles out, and you see what happens with the tokens as well. So, as long as there's a community and there are people who really care about the vision, like what Bytemaster's saying, to me, it's just a foregone conclusion that we win. I mean, that's not saying there aren't going to be times that we're going to be banging our heads against the walls and sometimes banging our heads against each other's. But ultimately, it's worth it, don't you think? I mean, this is some really amazing stuff that we're trying to do here. But anyway.
Do is just keep on keeping on.
Heck yeah. Thank you for showing up, Bytemaster, as always, and being as open as you can with us. I'm just going to go ahead and say this one more time. Bytemaster comes out and answers the questions, and he is a member of our community, and he just so happens to be the person who engineered this entire thing initially, and he's not expecting himself to be the ruler of it, so all of us are expected to kind of find where we have passion in this entire community and grab onto that as hard as you can and keep moving forward with it. Now, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end this recording.